Hello and welcome back to Unleash the Goats, where we unleash ourselves upon the Star Wars franchise with reckless abandon, and nobody quite knows what we'll say next, least of all us. I'm Nat, she, her. Angela, say hi.
Hi, I'm Angela / Faye, she, her.
Sugar, say hi.
Hi, I'm Sugar, she, her.
We are back with another Fixing the Sequels episode.
There's a lot of things to fix.
So, obviously, spoilers for the sequel trilogy. Also, spoilers for some things that aren't in the sequel trilogy, but should be.
Also, I guess now we can say spoilers for The Mandalorian, seasons 1 to 3, the Ahsoka show season 1, and Skeleton Crew. Which I was about to forget again.
We're not talking about that today. We're talking about the sequels. Which, to remind viewers, I have not seen.
You watched the first one, yes?
I watched the first one. I think I watched the second one because Finn and Rose, maybe, are in it. Mm-hmm. And they kiss. And I remember that annoying me because I was like, but Rey is right there. But I didn't see the last one, and I never will.
Well, if you were annoyed by Finn and Rose kissing, but you do want to support Kelly Marie Tran, you should go see The Wedding Banquet, where she gets to kiss Lily Gladstone a lot.
Oh my god, okay, I'm writing this down.
I love that for her.
Definitely a worthwhile rom-com if you want to see Kelly Marie Tran. But yeah, so we've done 2 other iterations of fixing the sequels. We've done Finn and Luke in the past. We are focusing on the new Jedi Order, Luke's Jedi, and the New Republic today. I'm sure there was a reason we stuck these together.
Because they did them both equally poorly.
They did everything equally poorly, but there was, I'm sure, a thematic reason.
Because the Jedi and the Republic are intrinsically tied, and they always have been, and the people who try and say that the Jedi should run off and do their own thing are completely misunderstanding the point of the Jedi and how much they want to help people.
They are a little bit more separated in their narratives within the context of the sequels, but we will go through both of them today. So, very briefly, we'll go through what the storyline is for Luke's Jedi Order in the sequels. We start with Luke had apparently 12 students, which included Kylo Ren, that he appears to have been training all by himself. When Kylo left, he apparently took a handful of the other students, who presumably became the other Knights of Ren, and everyone else was murdered. However, since we do get to see the Knights of Ren all gathered together at one point, that appears to have been 6, which means he murdered about 5 people. By, the process of math. He murdered 5 people.
Oh, wait. Fun fact for you.
Yes?
There's actually 12.
12 what?
Knights of Ren.
There are 12 Knights of Ren?
So did he murder nobody?
Not in the movies. I'm looking at the wiki right now, and it says that there have been 12 so far.
Okay, but I swear in the film, okay, for context, for anyone who's
film,
listening...
there are 6.
Okay, in the film there are 6, and I believe the film also states that there were 12 students total, which presumably included Kylo Ren. So if there are 6 Knights of Ren and Kylo, then he murdered 5 people. Which is, still 5 murders, but, we have seen worse mass murders in Star Wars.
True.
So this is actually, they do say, oh, he murdered Luke's entire school, all of the students. And it's like, well, no, he murdered 5 of them. He murdered half of them. Less than half. But he did apparently steal the other half. After this happens, Luke exiles himself to Ahch-To so that the Jedi can die with him because he believes that the legacy of the Jedi is failure. After Rey shows up and tries to convince him to come back with her, Luke goes to burn the Jedi texts, but he then hesitates, and Yoda's ghost burns the tree for him. Rey has stolen the Jedi texts at this point, although Luke does not know it, and Yoda chooses not to tell him this, because that's, I guess, beside the point of the lesson Luke is learning. Luke then decides to go off and fight Kylo Ren to help out Rey and Leia and the Rebellion, Resistance, and he proceeds to die. But he does declare that he will not be the last Jedi to Kylo before he dies, indicating that he has had some sort of a change of heart about the legacy of the Jedi. And then we head into Rise of Skywalker, where Rey is apparently trying to hear the voices of the Jedi who came before during her training with Leia, and is not super succeeding at this. At some point, Rey ends up seeing Luke's ghost, and he tells her that confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi, and now it is her destiny, because if she doesn't face Palpatine, then it will mean the end of the Jedi. When Rey goes to fight Palpatine and she is losing on Exegol, the voices of the Jedi past do speak to her and give her strength and tell her that she's not alone. Rey then declares herself all of the Jedi and is able to deflect Palpatine's lightning and disintegrate him. And she obviously names herself Rey Skywalker at the end and appears to have been staying a Jedi ever since then. And that is generally the narrative of the Jedi and Luke's Jedi Order across the sequels. Faye, would you like to tell us briefly the narrative of the New Republic in the sequels?
Let me tell you about the New Republic, because what did they do to my poor baby? So in the opening crawl, they're like, "Hey, hello everybody! Just so you know, the New Republic is here. Leia is like helping them. We need to lead a resistance against the First Order, but like, you know, they're like separate entities now. She's not really in charge. Like, you know, this is like the vibe." And everyone's like, "Okay, sure, that's weird, but fine." And then in this movie, Hux is like, "Yeah, if we destroy the New Republic, then the Resistance will have no more resources. They'll have no more ability to like help us, to like fight us, and they'll just have a total collapse. So that's why we have to destroy the New Republic." And then they blow up 5 whole planets to accomplish this goal. 5 of them. 5 populated planets. Because they're insane. None of them are like, show any kind of remorse or hesitation or nothing. Like, it's insane. This is like, in my opinion, way worse than Alderaan in like a lot of ways. Like, we feel more closer to Alderaan because it's like Leia's home planet. But this is 5 planets with way more people on them. And like they're just all dead. And yeah, I know I don't really give Vader a lot of shit for that because it wasn't his decision. But I will give Kylo Ren shit for it because I hate him more.
At least we're honest.
Anyways, there's a deleted scene in The Force Awakens where Leia like is like, "Hey, I need you," she's like talking to one of her like aides or whatever, and she's like, "Hey, I need you to like go to the Senate and like convince them to send us some more help because we need more help." And the girl's like, "They're not gonna listen to me." And she's like, they will, I promise, because like not all of them think that I'm insane," which is very cute, and I love her so much. Disney decided that the reason that this was a thing was because everybody found out that we talked about this last episode, but the reason that they did this was because like everyone found out that Leia was Vader's daughter and decided that that was a bad thing and that she should be ostracized for it, which was stupid as hell. But that's neither here nor there. So we know from this movie that the New Republic has 5 planets that they are operating out of over presumably most of the galaxy, is the implication of this movie. That they are essentially taken over for the Empire. They are like in the same position of authority over the same number of people, but they're now operating out of 5 planets instead of just Coruscant. Like, they're no longer on Coruscant as their seat of government. And then we see everybody on those planets get blown up. And that's all we know about the New Republic from the movies, because they never get mentioned again in The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker. That's not true. That's not 100% true. In the second movie, in The Last Jedi, when they're trying to make their stupid war commentary, which doesn't make any fucking sense, they're like, "Oh yeah, the Resistance and the New Republic like also bought their ships from us black market dealers," which also didn't make any sense. So that's all we know about the New Republic in high canon.
So this is a form of government that existed and was operating out of these 5 planets, and then we blew them up, and now there's no government, and we just don't follow up on that?
Shocking.
There's just nothing.
Cool. Awesome.
Just not a single... Just that they're like, "Oh yeah, there's no more government and nobody to replace them, and there was no senators or anybody who was like home during this time. No one is stepping up to like take over this authoritarian void somehow. Like, nope.
Cool. Yeah, the like quick and easy explanation I think that they try to give you is that like there was like this big meeting or vote or something that was happening, and so a lot of them were coming together onto like one of those planets, or you know, all of those planets, and so there weren't as many just kind of like around in other places as there would normally be, and so they kind of were able to put them all together and get them all with one fell swoop. But also, like, it's pretty unlikely that someone wasn't zooming in, you know, like because their kid was sick or something. I don't know.
There's one person who's just like, I can't rebuild the government.
Yeah.
I'll just retire, I guess.
This might be the hater in me, but those beams of light, those beams of destructions were moving really fucking slow. They were moving really fucking slow from like pretty far away. They could have evacuated some people. I know they make it seem like they didn't have any time to evacuate. They definitely had time to evacuate. If they had time to run, people had time to get on a plane and leave. I'm just saying. Like, if you watch them move, I understand it's a movie and they're doing this for, like, dramatic effect, but you can, like, see them moving. It's not like the instantaneous, like, psh, that the Death Star was. Like, it's a slow beam out. Like, yeah, that's my...
So is the First Order, this is a silly question, is the First Order like the Empire, where it is, like, a government system? And the New Republic is like a resistance against it, or is it separately like a terrorist group that exists in the galaxy?
It's more like a terrorist group.
Okay.
In the first movie, it's implied to be like kind of the reverse of the rebellion and the Empire, where like their New Republic like is in power and they're in control, and the resistance is kind of like they're like people who are off doing their own thing without that is like government sanctioned, but not really. And the New Republic, the First Order is like a terrorist group, like you said, similar to the rebellion, where they're like small, scrappy, running around doing crazy stuff, but like hard to pin down, so they haven't gotten rid of them yet.
They are like the dregs of the Empire, so like theoretically, like Hux, I think in particular, like his father was like an officer or a politician or something within the Empire, like high-ranking person within the Empire. So it is like the dregs of the Empire have gone off and kind of like, you know, done what they could to kind of
somehow built these like massive ships with incredible technology that nobody else has, and huge resources, millions of stormtroopers, all this stuff that they just like have for some reason, and there's no explanation of where they got it or who's funding them or anything. It's super logical and really well thought out. It's incredible world building that people should really take notes about so they can throw them in the trash.
So we feel like this wasn't a particularly satisfying follow-up to the prior two trilogies, I think is what we are leading to here.
No shit.
A good summary.
That this really just, it's not hitting the right notes of like what should have been happening with the Jedi or the New Republic or the places they should have had within the galaxy 30 years down the line. Do we feel like there is any criticism towards the Jedi in some of these storylines?
In the sequel storylines?
Yeah, in particular with Luke's Jedi, obviously. Not so much in the New Republic, because they don't connect very much, but yeah, Luke spends an entire movie shitting all over the Jedi.
My thing about, like, the criticism of the Jedi is that all of Luke's criticisms don't actually make sense for the position that Luke is in. Like, Luke learned from Yoda and Obi-Wan. We know there's very, very, very few records of the Jedi left over. And he knows that. So he knows, like, anything he's reading should be read with a critical eye towards, like, propaganda or whatever. And for him to reach this conclusion that it's the Jedi's fault that Anakin fell to the dark side, when he, of all people, knows so fucking well that Palpatine is the one who turned Anakin to the dark side and is 100% responsible because he almost fell to the dark side because of Palpatine. It doesn't actually make any sense for him to spout off those specific criticisms of the Jedi. I could logically see them giving him like a Jedi critical storyline and having some kind of critique. I'm not sure what it could be, but I could see like him coming up with like, I don't know, like they overextended themselves or they were too caught up in the government or like something along those lines where like he's looking at what he's trying to do with his Jedi being like, oh, like why didn't they do this, this, or this? What he does is regurgitate some asshole on Reddit's hot take of the day, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, these are not beefs that Luke specifically should have with the Jedi, or reasons that he should think that they shouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I feel like I guess I could see some criticism that he might have, but I feel like that would not make sense for him to be leaning on Jedi criticism in the context of him just being defeatist and upset about what happened to his Jedi. Because, like, yes, you can go like, oh, they overextended themselves, but, like, you know, what they're having him do is, like, oh, I feel so guilty and upset about what happened to my Jedi Order, my students, and my failure with Kylo, and just, like, projecting it backwards onto the prequels Jedi. But, like, the overextension, I feel like, is less connected to that. Like, I buy that Luke could end up kind of broken and defeated. I just don't buy that broken, defeated nature would then lead to, like, the Jedi were a legacy of failure and they should die with me. You know, I could see him going, like, you know, the Jedi shouldn't die, but, like, I should not be the one to remake them. You know, and having...
That would make way more sense if he was sitting there being like, listen, I cannot teach you anything because I have failed in every way. The Jedi might be able to survive. You might be able to be a great Jedi, but I'm not the one to teach you, and I can't teach you anything. Like, yeah. That would make way more sense for him as a character in that moment, with Rey sitting there being like, please teach me something.
Yeah, like, if you wanted to do broken Luke, you know, defeated Luke, fine. Like, I mean, I think it's kind of a dumb choice to go that direction to begin with, for a number of different reasons.
No, it's stupid.
If you want to learn more about what we thought about what happened to Luke, go listen to our Luke episode. But, yeah, I feel like leaning towards the Jedi criticism, just, like, it does nothing for Luke's character, it does nothing for the world building, it's just kind of, like, stupid. And I've seen people go, like, oh, well, like, it's not actually meant to be a Jedi critical story, because at the end of it, Luke turns around and says, you know, and changes his mind, and goes, well, I won't actually be the last Jedi, and kind of gives, like, this weird blessing to Rey, I guess. Not that she even gets to hear it, so I don't know what point it has. You know, he says it to Kylo, I think, because it's during their big fight at the end, and it's like, okay, but you spent the entire movie, like, shitting all over Rey, wanting to be a Jedi and telling her everything, and then, like, your big declaration that you won't be the last Jedi actually isn't said to Rey at all. It just, like, yeah, I guess he changes his mind a little, but, like, it doesn't erase that you just spent 2 hours of Luke shitting on the Jedi.
I have beef with one specific moment in The Last Jedi, because... Okay, I understand that this scene is meant to be funny, and it is. It's very funny. But when Yoda blows up the tree, and Luke is like, oh my god, the sacred texts, and Yoda's like, read them, have you? And Luke is like, well, I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean that he had sacred texts of the Jedi? Not that many. There's like maybe like 10.
At most, yeah.
And he's stuck on this island for like 20 years, and he never read them? What the fuck are you talking about? Why would Luke, stuck on an island for 20 years, presumably very bored, all of the time, not read the sacred texts of the Jedi?
Also, do we know that they were only on that island?
What do you mean?
Like, did Luke bring them to the island, or were they there and he just discovered them when he ran off?
Well, okay, presumably he's had them at least since he got to the island, right? Because he hasn't left. At minimum, he's had them at least that long. So at least 20 years, he's had these books, and you're trying to tell me that he's never read them.
It's not quite. I think it's more closer to 10.
My timeline makes perfect sense.
10 to 15.
Unless they're trying to imply to me that Luke doesn't know how to read, which I know is false, because he reads in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
There is verifiable scenes where he reads things. I can give you timestamps if you try to argue with me. I swear I will. Come in the comments and try and tell me that I'm wrong, and I will give you a timestamp. But, like... I hate that scene so much. It's so stupid. It's so awful. And, like, it makes Luke out to be, like, so, not disingenuous, but, like, so dismissive of the Jedi heritage that he's, like, seemingly the last of and has previously treated with so much respect throughout the original trilogy. And it's so obnoxious, and I really hate what it does to his character.
What's almost worse is that Yoda, the way Yoda treats it, of like, you know, Yoda going like, haha, read them, have you? Like, no one would, you know, they're super boring old texts and they're out of date anyway. You know, that Yoda, the 900-year-old Yoda who spent his basic, you know, several centuries as a Jedi, his entire many, you know, years long life, like, you know, is super dismissive of these, you know, old texts. And, like, sure, yes, maybe they are out of date in the sense that, like, obviously the Jedi were around for many thousands of years and, you know, developed different philosophies and cultures and things, but, like, the Jedi as a culture do not seem to be one that would just completely dismiss, you know, original texts, you know, that helped found their culture out of hand. And so it just feels a little, like, even almost worse to me that Yoda, you know, is like, haha, you didn't read them, did you? Well, yeah, no one does. No one ever has, you know, because, like, they're dumb and who would? You know, kind of validating Luke's choice not to have read them. Like, through Yoda, I feel like the narrative validates that idea that these texts do not matter. Which is, I don't know, like, I feel like The Last Jedi was just trying to throw shit at a barrel and see if it worked, because, like, you know, you have Yoda saying, well, the texts don't matter. Who cares? Like, they're old and boring anyway.
I mean, to be clear, I don't give a fuck about the text. I don't care that these random texts that they invented for this movie got blown up or, like, didn't get blown up or whatever. I don't give a fuck. It's more about, like, what it's saying about the characters that they don't care about the text.
I care that the narrative thinks it doesn't matter in the sense that, like, I feel like it's part of this whole theme of, like...
Yes.
The Jedi were old-fashioned and out of date, but then they have Rey take them and learn from them, so I'm like, what was the point of him saying, you know, that the texts didn't matter and that it was whatever that Luke, you know, that they burned, you know, that Luke never read them and that they burned, if you have Rey taking them anyway? Like, what am I supposed to get out of this? Because I feel like it's sending opposite messages of they don't matter, except that they're not gone anyway, and Rey does have them and is learning from them. And I'm supposed to take that as probably a positive. It's unclear what I'm supposed to be getting from the film's narrative. Like, it does seem like I feel like what I'm supposed to be getting is like, okay, well, you know, the old texts are there and they can be helpful, but the only way to truly be a Jedi is to, like, you know, take it and then, you know, do your own thing with it. And Luke did not. He was too much, you know, repeating the stuff that the old Jedi did and all of their mistakes, and that's why they fell in the first place, and that's why Luke falls again. But Rey is not going to do that. You know, Rey is going to do it the right way.
Which, again, makes no sense, because Luke doesn't know anything about how the Jedi did things the old way. He knows nothing. Obi-Wan and Yoda specifically do not tell him about any of the Jedi protocol. They don't even call him Padawan. Padawan first came into existence in the prequels. Like... No, that's not true. Do they call him Padawan? No, they don't. Does Yoda ever call him Padawan?
Does he call them Master?
No, he wouldn't. I mean, they use the term Jedi Master, but I don't think he calls him, like, Master Obi-Wan or Master Yoda.
I think he might call him Master Yoda.
He might use Master Yoda. He definitely doesn't do it with Obi-Wan, because he just calls Obi-Wan Ben.
I feel like Obi-Wan would have, if he called him Master Yoda, it would be because Obi-Wan referred to him as Master Yoda, and he'd pick it up from there.
He also does recognize that it's, like, a Jedi Master, and so he has the title to attach to Yoda as needed.
Yeah.
But I don't think he ever calls him Padawan. Because Ben certainly never doesn't.
No, yeah. Obi-Wan definitely
I'm, like,
doesn't.
90% sure that Yoda never does. You know what? If we're wrong, come in the comments and tell us.
It's interesting to have Luke show back up and be like, here are all the things I'm critical about relating to the Jedi Order, and to be like, what do you know about the Jedi Order?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are these criticisms coming from? Where did you learn these things to be critical of them? Because it kind of sounds like maybe you're criticizing yourself for losing losing your students, which is so valid and fine for you to have feelings about that. But it seems like a lot to be like, and that's because Jedi in general is bad. What do you mean?
Yeah, because even if he is like projecting, right? Even if he's projecting it onto the Jedi, how does he know those specific things about the Jedi to project onto?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, the only thing that could possibly have given him this information is some random old guy who, like, remembers the Jedi really well, like, really kept up in the tabloids, and, like, started talking his ear off at some weird social function he had to go to about all of these different Jedi lore things because he thinks Luke should know them. And now Luke's like, great, I know everything about the Jedi now. I guess, okay, I will give... no, I can't give them credit for this because in... the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka is hanging out with Luke. But that hadn't happened. That wasn't even an inkling in anybody's mind when The Last Jedi came out. So they don't get any credit for Ahsoka and Luke having met. Because no one even, like, had it on their radar as a possibility.
No, that's like giving them credit for having her name her son Ben. By saying, like, stupid. Oh, but, like, you know, Leia and Obi-Wan had that whole adventure together. It's like, fuck off. No, like, I love the Kenobi show, and it's wonderful, and it's great, and it does help validate that, but also, like, they definitely did not have that as a thing, you know, that they were basing this on.
All they did was, like, here's a name that also happens to be Luke's son's name from the Legends. That'll make everybody happy. Oh, yeah, I have another thing. Do you know what else the whole, like, Jedi book thing was a slap in the face? Is because... there's like a multi-book arc in Legends where Luke is trying desperately to find any information on the previous order so that he has some kind of blueprint for how to set up his own order because he's like ridden with insecurity and shit and like doesn't want to fuck this up on like how to set up a new academy and like all this stuff. Like when I say multi-books, I mean at least 10 books have this as like a theme. Not like a main theme, but like an underlying subtext thing. Like, that's, like, a thing in the courtship. I could go on. But, like... and then for Rian Johnson, who has been heavily involved in the Star Wars fandom for a long time, so very much knows that this was a theme in Legends. He's like, haha, but then he found these books in my story, but he didn't read them. Shut the fuck up. I'm gonna throw you into a volcano. I'm so sick of your shit.
Get him.
I have beef with Rian Johnson. I have so much beef with him. I'm not even going to pronounce his name correctly. I hate him so much.
The other thing that I was kind of connecting in terms of themes that were originally in the Lucasfilms is this idea of people coming together to, you know, defeat the darkness and how standing together is what allows darkness to be defeated and things like that. There obviously is a lot of that in there. I don't think it's executed well in the sequels by any means. But it technically is there, especially with this idea of like a community, you know, outreach kind of thing happening within Rise of Skywalker, and they all show up, you know, like the tugboats on D-Day and stuff like that, and save everybody's asses, but like, you know, it kind of has a very like who cares kind of thing because this isn't a theme that really got built up particularly well. You know, it's supposed to be some sense of like, you know, kids getting inspired by stories of the resistance and stuff, but it's like, okay, but like, you know, where and when and how, and you know, it's just, there's not a lot of connection there. The prequels had
it's like, how is that helpful?
I mean, it's helpful in the sense that, like, you know, when the New Republic is taken out, that what's left is the rest of the galaxy, right? And that, like, the rest of the galaxy is perfectly capable of standing up to the darkness and taking it out. But that, you know, that, like, the Resistance cannot do it on its own. It needs the support of everybody else. They need to actually stand up and take it out. You know, and say not again kind of thing, which like would have been a really nice theme in other ways, I think. Like, I love that as a theme of like, darkness is always going to come back. It's never going to be gone for good. It will come back in different forms and shapes and sizes, and we need to be ready for it so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. You know, and one of the big mistakes that, you know, is so clear in the prequels is that, like, you know, the people of the galaxy are not united. You know, the Sith, you know, are able to turn people against each other and kind of make them more self-centered and reliant on only a very insular group of people. You know, the Jedi are constantly trying to, get people to stand up for themselves and stand up with them. Especially through, you can see that mostly in the Clone Wars, but, the Jedi alone are not enough either. And, you see Palpatine turning Anakin against the Jedi. You see, Palpatine turning the senators against each other and against the galaxy and making them greedier and more selfish. And so there is this theme of, like, the symbiosis that held the galaxy together is breaking. And so it would have been interesting if we saw something like, okay, like, now that situation's coming up again, we are standing up together this time. Like, it's taking everything we've got and we're tempted not to, but, like, we're gonna actually do it right this time and stand up against the darkness and not let it take us over. And I think that would have been, like, a really nice way to do that, but it's not how they did it.
Do you know what would have been a really good place for them to do this in just the Rise of Skywalker, to just really, like, have, like, an overarching theme instead of, like, a last minute addition, is if in that scene when they're on the desert planet and they're, like, running through the market and the stormtroopers are chasing them, as if they'd had, like, a People of New York moment in that festival, like, market scene. Like, if the people of that town had started chasing down the stormtroopers and, like, helped them get away, and then, like, actually fuck off stormtroopers, fuck off the First Order, we hate you, and, like, this could have been, like, an indicative thing of, like, the attitude of the galaxy starting to turn towards, like, people running away from the First Order to people fighting the First Order themselves and, like, beating their asses. And I feel like if they had just, like, added, like, a little scene there, like, the final scene would have had, like, a little, just, like, the slightest hint of a kick.
Yeah, and of course the last movie is effectively at least 2 films, if not 3, kind of shoved into one, so they're moving very quickly from action piece to action piece, kind of thing.
They have time for, like, 5 minutes of them running on those stupid speeders being like, oh, they fly now? Like, they had time to just be like, have some dudes show up and throw stuff at them. I don't know. They could have done something.
Yeah, so there's some issues. Thematically, the sequels aren't matching up to the originals and the prequels. It's an issue. I feel like we do see similar issues even moving forward with stories that have been made since the sequels that are sort of set in the period between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, of, like, lead up, like, how did we get to that situation? So things like the Ahsoka show, the Mandalorian, Skeleton Crew, that there's even some, like, lack of coherence between those, about what the New Republic is and what it's supposed to stand for, and, that, like, there's no clear idea at Disney or amongst its creators of, like, what those themes are intended to be and, what the New Republic was supposed to have been in the galaxy.
I feel like those, because there's such a huge jump between, like, the prequels and the originals and then to the sequels, like, how do we get here is a lot of work to do, and I don't know that I can confidently say any of these shows are doing them well. I can confidently say that Ahsoka is doing it poorly, because I've seen that one and it sucked.
It's so frustrating that they're like, yeah, the New Republic, it's just like the Empire with different labels on it. It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why would it be like that? Why would that happen? Why is nobody, like, trying to, like, it's so frustrating. Like, I'm sorry, if I wanted to watch a show, or if I wanted to watch media about the government being evil, I could watch Blade Runner. Like, there's so many, like, grimdark sci-fis about, like, the future government being, like, crazy and evil and you're always caught in a cycle of failure. That's not Star Wars. Star Wars is supposed to be hopeful and they're supposed to be able to fix things at the end. You know what I mean? Like, why are we being, like, over and over and over again just, like, the government sucks with, like, really thinly veiled allusions to, like, our government? If I wanted to learn how bad government is in our world, I could turn on the news. That's like, it's not, I don't have an issue with them, like, trying to draw some real world comparisons to our government and, like, real world political situations in Star Wars. I think that's fine, but, like, putting a message into these shows that it doesn't matter what you do, the government is always going to suck and it's always going to be worse and it's never going to get better, is not helping. That's not helping. It's fine if you want to put in some allusions there, but, like, draw some parallels, whatever, that's cool, do that. But don't then try and tell me that it's never going to get better no matter what the heroes do. That sucks.
It also is just cheapening this theme of there is always going to be this fight between good and evil, and that good is always going to rise up and defeat it. If you say that the New Republic is just like the Empire, then that means that we didn't rise up and defeat the evil and then watch it rise again. It means that it's just been like this the whole time, and that's a less interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, I can understand why people feel like that's nuanced, but I also am kind of like, okay, but, like, it's not, though. Like, you see where it's very samey now, you know? And like Faye said, there's no hope now. Like, everybody, all of the triumphs that they had at the end of Return of the Jedi are completely eliminated. Like, every single happy ending is gone.
And, like, that, there's no hope for a happy ending at the end of Rise of Skywalker either, because what is different now that wasn't different at the end of Return of the Jedi? You know, like, the endings are so similar because the sequels tried to copy, like, every good moment from the original trilogy, and so what you end up with is a really similar feeling story, like, with really similar beats, but none of the hope from the original one, because you said that the original one, they didn't do anything right, everything sucked, they did everything wrong. So why should I believe that this story is going to end any better?
Right.
Unless they're trying to say that in order to fix the government problems, we should blow everything up. Because I don't think that's a message you want to send.
It's a scary one to send. The exception to all of this, of course, is the Skeleton Crew. Not the Skeleton Crew, is Skeleton Crew. Which we did all watch. Unfortunately, we had a couple of technological issues with getting that review out, but we did watch it. We did enjoy it. It was a solid watch. But one of the best parts about it is its representation of the New Republic, where there's really very little complexity to the New Republic in Skeleton Crew, but that's because the New Republic in Skeleton Crew is pretty unequivocally the good guys. Like, this is very explicitly said out loud that they are the good guys. All they do is come in and take out pirates. Like, throughout the show, every time they come in, it's to come in and fight off more pirates, and then they come in and save the entire planet, at least at the end. You know, and it just felt like such a breath of fresh air that Skeleton Crew was like, no, fuck everything else that's happening in the Mandoverse. Like, the New Republic are, in fact, the good guys. Like, that needs to be true for this story to work. And, I mean, I do think that, like, the New Republic being immensely flawed is like a symptom of the fact that they blew it up immediately in the sequels, and so, like, the original sin is blowing up the entire New Republic at the very beginning instead of writing a story about the New Republic.
So now they're having to be like, oh, it's actually fine that they got blown up, it's all good,
this doesn't have any impact, it's fine.
But also, like, you know, if we say that the New Republic was this whole big government, you know, they built themselves up over 30 years, they had 5 planets they were working out of, how do you justify that they got immediately blown up? Well, they were, like, cracked all to hell, and they were basically, you know, like, you know, taken over by the Empire anyway. You know, so they were never a functioning government to begin with, and so it explains why the First Order could just, like, trounce in and immediately blow it up.
Well, see, my thing is that, like, if the thing about it is that they're cowards, because if they actually put in some work and they were like, hey, this is the government, this is what it was, this is how good it was, this is how functional they were, this is the good that they did in the galaxy, this is the direction they were headed, that makes the gut punch of all 5 planets being blown up way worse. Like, it makes it hit so much harder. It makes it way more painful. Like, it's similar to, like, how Alderaan being blown up in the beginning of A New Hope doesn't really mean that much. Like, you know it's Leia's home planet, but that's really the only attachment you have to it.
And you've barely met Leia to begin with.
Exactly. You just met her. Like, you don't really, like, it sucks, but, like, you're not really that connected to it. Whereas, like, now it's like, oh my god, it's Alderaan. Like, it's where Bale and Bree are from. It's, like, all this, like, it's this beautiful planet. Like, we know so much about it. But, like, they're not willing to do that for the Hossian Prime system. They're not willing to give it any backstory to make the sequels sadder, because they don't want to have any negative reactions. They don't want people to, like, be upset with them. So they're not willing to, like, give it any kind of narrative weight. And it's so frustrating because it's not like it would be that difficult for them to do. They're just not willing to take any risks.
They don't want anyone to dislike the sequels. And they did a great job avoiding that.
Which is why Andor is so fucking good, because Andor's over here like, no, we're going to make it hurt worse. We're going to make it hurt more.
Yeah.
The amount of advertising I've now seen for Andor that's like, we're going to make you completely rethink the entirety of Star Wars by the end of season 2. I'm like, all right, bitch, go off. So we've given a few things in our analysis here that are kind of like ways we think they could have done it better, but we're going to delve a little deeper into that. So we're starting with our top tier, as we have in the last 2 versions of these episodes, which are things that were sort of explicitly promised within the context of the films, that either got dropped or just didn't go anywhere. So, things that are explicitly promised theoretically have to have been like kind of said aloud, to the point that like it is absolutely ridiculous that this didn't go anywhere. So one of these is within the context of the New Republic, like, where is the rest of the New Republic? Yes, there's presumably a lot of them on those 5 planets, but where are the others? What was the breadth and reach of the New Republic? Why is there nothing, absolutely 0% of it left, after those 5 planets are destroyed, that the Resistance can then, like, pull on and try to gain any kind of support from? Where are the connections that used to exist there? And it's just kind of wild that it is completely gone.
And in terms of, like, the Jedi, like, where we talked about the Knights of Ren a little bit, but also, like, where are they in general? Why is there only 12 students after 30 years? Like, why are there no Jedi after 30 years? Why is there only these 12? Like, presumably, I mean, Kylo Ren isn't that old, and we don't really know how old the other students are, but, like, was he only taking, like, babies? I mean, we know that Kylo Ren was only there for a couple of years, right? He got sent there when he was, like, 7 or 8-ish, if I remember right. So, like, was he only taking, like, 7 or 8-year-olds? Like, has no one else graduated? Why was everybody on the planet to die in the first place? Like, there's so many questions about why, like, so many of these, like, tragedies happened the way that they did, and none of them, like, get answered. Like, they set up things like they set up the flashback for what happened between Luke and Kylo in The Force Awakens as, like, we're going to get some answers about the Jedi Academy later on, but, like, what happened later on. And then they never follow up on that. There's no connections later on about, like, what role did the Jedi play for the New Republic? Were they only, like, did Luke just stay on his planet training people? Did they go on missions? Like, there's nothing in the later movies to suggest anything about what role Luke and Leia actually had in the government prior to these movies.
Yeah, and those later shows haven't done anything with that either. Like, we know Leia, was it willing to lie for Hera? So she's got some sort of senatorial position where she's got a little bit of power and weight to throw around. But what we would have preferred to see was obviously, like, more of the New Republic, not have it get blown up immediately. Let it continue, like, even if it takes a massive blow, let it actually keep going and continue to help the Resistance, even if it's at lower power or lower resources. That there is something there that continue to stands.
If they hadn't done their stupid-ass fuel plot in The Last Jedi, they could have had shown us the Resistance leaving their current base and going to where the rest of the Republic, like, is. They could have been like, and here's the New Republic. Like, here's the government. Here's how, like, what's going on with everybody else in the galaxy. Here's, like, a little bit of, like, the broader scope of how everybody else in the galaxy is dealing with the First Order, like, doing so much damage. Like, they could have done, like, some interesting world building in that movie, and they were just like, nah, never mind.
Especially with the possibility of Leia actually potentially being the only person who could then step up and take it over, right? That, like, Leia, takes a step down because she's older and, she's reprioritizing towards the Resistance. But, like, the entire government just got eliminated, like, where are her resources best placed? Maybe it is actually, like, working to rebuild the New Republic as quickly as she can to give more support to the Resistance by being someone in power.
I have another thing. Because they killed my boy Admiral Akbar on screen because they hate me personally. Because Rian Johnson knew that I would be upset about that. Because he sucks. And my question is, okay, sure, he's in the Resistance. That's fine. He's old as fuck at this point. He's old as hell. He's like 80 years old. The Resistance is pretty new. The Resistance is only like the last 10, 15 years. Was he in government before that? Did he leave his government like job to go help out the Resistance? Like, were there other people like that who like left the New Republic when it seemed like they were going to be ineffectual against the New Order and like moved into the Resistance? These are all questions that they could have really easily answered and been like, yeah, it sucks that the New Republic like all died, but like we actually have a bunch of former officials in the Resistance anyways, so we can actually step in as like a pseudo government for now until we get rid of the First Order and like help out. Like, those are all things that could have happened if they had like decided to be competent writers.
Yeah, and like you mentioned too, like there was this interesting setup of the role reversal, right? Of like, you know, the First Order being kind of the scrappy, you know, smaller group, you know, fighting against the established government that was the New Republic. And like, I get that they did, you know, obviously eliminate a lot of the New Republic, but you kind of then lose that interesting role reversal by going like, okay, well now the First Order is the more powerful one again, and immediately the Resistance is now on the rocks. And it's like, okay, but like that role reversal was the interesting part of this. And there is some aspects of Force Awakens where they are clearly, you know, going like, okay, we're starting off with something that feels very similar to the original, but we're like reversing some of it. We're like reversing your expectations or subverting your expectations of that storyline, you know, that like, oh yeah, it's the scrappy, you know, like kind of farmer person on a desert planet, but it's a girl this time kind of thing. And, you know, the New Republic being the one in power, or, you know, Kylo Ren being incapable of being saved by his father, you know, that relationship not being enough to save the guy who's already gone to darkness. There's a lot of interesting reversals happening, or subverting of expectations happening. But then The Last Jedi just kind of didn't take that the next step further. And it's like, it would have been really interesting to keep the New Republic around, at least in some element, you know, of like, okay, yes, like this big thing went, but like we've got something left that can continue to make a stand. And that's the part that matters, you know. We're still not really down and out yet, you know, like they take out the Death Star in A New Hope, but it didn't actually like completely eliminate the Empire, you know. There was extra effort that had to be put in to take out the Empire. So it's like, why was that not true for the New Republic?
When they blew up the Death Star 2, the Death Star 2 was not the victory. The victory was them killing the Emperor. That was the victory. That was what killed them. There's not like a figurehead that they're killing off when they blow up those planets that it indicates to us that like the government's no longer functional, because we know in the original trilogy, and especially with the prequels, that basically Palpatine is the Empire. And like without him, it all falls apart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it would have been interesting if that person had ended up being Leia, right? Like, maybe they did establish there's a figurehead, that person is gone, but, like, there are people who can step into his place pretty quickly, because the New Republic was not actually a dictatorship. You know, there are people who can come in. There's a chain of command. Leia can step in and be like, all right, we lost, like, 10 of our people in that chain of command, but, like, I am here. I can step into this role, or like have a quickie election, right? Like everyone comes together and she's not intending to end up like an acting chancellor, but everyone turns to her and goes like, you know, like you've got the most experience out of all of us here. We feel like you've got the best level head. You've got the best idea of what's going on right now. We're putting you in charge. And then, you know, you get this interesting thing that could happen there too, with like Leia then has to pass on some responsibility, and you know who could get it? It's Poe Dameron.
My boy Poe! My boy Poe!
It would be Poe Dameron, right? That, like, Leia has to take a step back from the Resistance in order to build up the New Republic again. And then, you know, her little ingenue comes in and takes over. And there's some interesting things that could happen there, where you get a similar concept of what was going on in The Last Jedi, with Leia not being around as much and Poe having to, like, manage leadership, I guess, of some sort. But, you know, not as stupid. And...
I mean, you could also have, like, if we're going to incorporate the Jedi part in here, if you really need to have Luke being a self-deprecating piece of shit, you could have him be like, the reason I failed was because I thought I needed to keep the Jedi isolated away from the government, because I thought that's what failed the Jedi last time, and that didn't work. That sucked. Keeping the Jedi isolated kept them safe for a little while, but ultimately it just made them more vulnerable to cracks within. And I don't want that to happen again. And like, but I'm not the one who can do that. Like, Rey, like, I don't know the galaxy anymore, and you do. And then he'll be like, and here's my students that I have kept protected for these 10 years on this island. I need you to take them into the galaxy and teach them how to be Jedi of the people again, and teach them how to be, I'm using the word Jedi, but Jedi is a verb, like teaching them to be servants of the people again, rather than hidden monks in the monastery on the top of the mountain, you know, like, and that having that be like the theme of like the Jedi and the Republic do need each other in order to function as like a good government. Because again, everybody, in case you forgot, the Jedi and the Republic functioned together perfectly well for 10,000 years. It's a long fucking time. It's a long... Do you understand how long 10,000 years is? That's longer than the recorded history of humankind. That's so fucking long. And they functioned together that whole time. The fact that they fell in the end does not negate the 10,000 years that they functioned together. So, him being like, I was wrong, actually, those 10,000 years did mean something, and that's what the Jedi need. That's what the New Republic needs in order to, like, keep going. Would it be so great? And then, of course, the Jedi new students would come out and they'd all be super adorable and cute. And I would cry.
Would you give him more, like, other teachers? Or just Luke with a lot of students?
I think it would have been interesting to have a variety of people, right? Because, like Faye mentioned, like, is he only taking in, like, babies or small children? When that doesn't seem like a super reasonable thing for Luke to be limiting himself to. Just given his options. And so it seems more reasonable that he might have, like, adult students who are going, like, hey, like, I feel like there might be some sort of weirdness here. Like, I've got these weird feelings. And Luke going, hey, guess what? This might be force sensitivity. Let me, like, you know, give you something, you know, or older Jedi, right? Like, maybe there's a fucking survivor. Ah, ha, 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 ha. You know, who somehow made it through.
I think it would have made sense in terms of, like, who he has with him, like, what Jedi he's bringing out. I think it would make sense for the age ranges to match up with, like, he got, like, the older people got the kids out while the like, fighters kind of, like, distracted the Knights of Ren kind of thing. So he would have, like, older people who were, like, around his age and, like, kids who would have been kids at the time that they ran. So you'd have, like, kind of a mix, but not a lot of people who were, like, Kylo Ren's age, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of, like, who he had with him, yeah, I do think it would make sense for him to have, like, adults and, like, teenagers, essentially.
Yeah, I don't know that he would have had... Like, he might have had a couple of adults who'd kind of turned into teachers by the end. But he obviously would not have started with any other teachers. He would have had to train people into becoming teachers for quite a while before that ended up being a thing that he could start to rely on. But yeah, we're skipping a little bit into tier 3 here of things that, you know, were never promised or implied, but that we would have liked to have seen anyway. Number one of which has always been for, I think, all three of us, but specifically for me and Faye, who actually watched these movies, that there were a Jedi other than Luke, you know, that, like, Rey shows up on Octo, and, like, honestly, like, my personal ideal is that Luke is not broken or defeated at all, but that the reason Luke has been stuck on Octo is because he is staying there to protect the last remaining Jedi. That there are Jedi there with him, and he's run and, like, made it look like everyone's dead, and he's just, you know, in hiding out of grief and guilt, because that means that, like, fewer people are going to come after him. Whereas, like, if it became clear that, like, oh, guess what? There's, like, 12 or 15, you know, like, surviving Jedi students on this planet with him, that becomes a threat. And, you know, that Luke is working to protect them and kind of like keep up appearances that there's no one left, until Rey shows up and is like, cool, great, I totally understand that, but also like the Hosnian Prime system just got obliterated. Like you cannot just hide out here with the Jedi. Like, maybe he was like, yes, I ran and I had to protect the Jedi, but like I knew that Leia had it, kind of thing. I knew the Republic was there and was strong, but now that's gone and the situation has changed and he has to make a new decision. Maybe the other Jedi are like, hey, we've been stuck here for like 10 years. Part of being a Jedi is helping the galaxy. Let us go. Let us get out there and do what we can do. And so there's this whole arc that like Rey and Luke can go on together of Rey, and Rey figuring out what it means to be a Jedi and Luke kind of maybe being reminded what it means to be a Jedi, and, connecting that again to the symbiosis theme of, everyone in the galaxy coming together is what allows darkness to be defeated. Would have been like chef's kiss, my personal preferred version of how that storyline went, and I will always be very devastated that they just eliminated all the Jedi all over again. And it's like, okay, but like Order 66 was the most tragic thing I had seen in my young life when I saw that movie, and it has had an impact because like you watch those first two, by the time you get to Order 66, you've spent some time with the Jedi, and it's like really impactful because you kind of know them, at least as an organization. Like, you don't know a lot of those characters super personally, the ones that you get to see killed. But, like, it's sad because you know what the Jedi are, but I feel like that's less true for Luke's Jedi. You don't know them. You don't spend a lot of time with them. You spend no time with them. It's just like, oh, whoops, Luke had some students and now they're dead. And it's like, am I supposed to care? Like, I don't even know what his order looked like. Were they nice people? Were they just randos?
We have to give George Lucas his flowers because, like, in the prequels, he does such a good job of being like, here is, like, a pretty limited view of the Jedi Order because we're only going to focus on, like, these couple characters. But of the stuff that you're going to see, here is the implied structure of the Jedi Order. And you're going to understand it well enough that everyone's going to be able to write fan fiction. It's all going to be pretty consistent. Because, like, we're going in, we're like, he's like, you know what, here's what the building looks like. Here's who's in charge. Here's the basic missions that your average Jedi can expect to go on. Because, like, Anakin and Vader, and, Anakin and Obi-Wan are, like, not surprised by the type of missions that they're going on, the diplomatic missions and stuff. And that's pretty much enough to, and here's the age of the children in the youngling creche. And, like, what some of their classes kind of look like. We're going to see them in the background as we walk by. And that is a very impressive thing to do without spending like an hour on world building. It is pretty impressive that he's able to accomplish so much. What's the word I'm looking for? Not environment, but like so much of the ecosystem, I guess. There's like a word for it, and I'll think of it when I'm editing this later. So maybe editing Angela will come in and tell you what it is. So much of that in such a limited time that he's spending, because he has to spend 10 minutes in the droid factory fight scene, obviously. And when we get to the sequels, there's none of that in terms of like establishing any of these organizations. Like, we don't know what the New Order Republic looks like at all. Like, we barely know what the Senate building looked like from a deleted scene. We don't really know what the Resistance looks like aside from like the 2 or 3 scenes we get where we only focus on Leia. We don't really see any other organization at all, not even in the background.
And then Holdo shows up out of nowhere and they're like, she's the successor to Leia, and it's like, why? We've never even met this bitch.
Yeah, like, we've never met her at all. And a second, why was every other leader on the same ship in the same room? That's crazy. That's insane. During a battle? You're telling me during a battle everyone was in the same room? God, that's so fucking stupid. Anyways, but like, they don't do like any kind of establishing of world building. And it's so frustrating because, like, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. If you ever read the Murderbot Diaries, which you should absolutely go read right now, they're these beautiful little books, and, like, they're very short stories. They're very, very, very singularly focused on this short story, and they're really not that long. They're, like, 100 pages each, maybe. But when you're reading them, you get the sense that this author knows everything about the world. You know pretty much exactly how this world basically functions. She does a really good job of giving you only the information that you need without it feeling like you don't know anything that's happening, because you can tell that she has put so much thought into this and everything is so consistent. And every time she's like, and here's another detail, you're like, that fits perfectly with everything else that I already know about this world. And you can tell when you're watching the sequels that no one put in any world building to these new governments and these new organizations. They were just like, here's some cool names, and moved on. There's no like Bible. There's no like reference back to like, here's how this stuff works. And it's so frustrating to watch because you want to be invested in this stuff. You want to be invested in these characters, but it's so difficult to know what context to even put them in because they're not doing any kind of world building. Like even for the New Order stormtroopers, because we get like a little bit about like Finn's in the first movie about like what it looks like for him, that he's raised with these stormtroopers. They're all stolen from birth. And then they don't give us like any other idea of like where they're trained, what it looks like for their lives, like any more information. Like Finn is a main character and we don't really know anything else after that. We meet other ex-stormtroopers and they still don't tell us like what it's like for these New Order like stormtroopers on the inside. They're not brainwashed, they're not clones. Like what is it like for them? And like it's so frustrating that like it's all so inconsistent all of the time, and it's just like whatever the writer today thought would be interesting for the story, and it's so frustrating. I miss George Lucas.
Yeah, it doesn't help, I think, too, that like the things that have come out since with Ahsoka and The Mandalorian in particular have tried to like add some of this to it, and it really just makes it more confusing and worse.
Because none of them are talking to each other, so every time somebody adds something, someone else contradicts it like a year later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we wrote this, it would be better and perfect, and we would make $1 billion. Because we would write it well. And we would have a Bible where we wrote down all of the world building stuff, and we would all reference it all of the time. Rule number 1, when you're hired, you can't write anything until you've read this book.
Yeah.
And explain it to someone who
Yes.
hasn't read it.
You have to read it, and then every time you write something and it contradicts it, I'm going to make you read it again. Do you guys want a goat fact to end out this episode about how terrible the pre-sequels were? Because now I'm upset. My head is empty.
Yeah.
Do you know whose heads are not empty? Goats, because goats are very intelligent and curious animals. Their inquisitive nature is exemplified in their constant desire to explore and investigate anything unfamiliar which they come across.
I wish that the writers of the sequels had that same curiosity. And wanted to explore every little corner of the world that they implied that they were going to build and then didn't.
Oh, God, if only. If only.
Our intro and outro music is Mos Eisley Cantina by Speedkicks. Angela and I edit, our artwork is by me, and Sugar is our writer and researcher. You can find us on Instagram and Tumblr at Unleash the Goats. Thanks for listening.